Let's talk about combat in Mind Over Magic. How do you beat the difficult 4-skull enemies? Who should do the fighting, and what abilities should they use? In this video, we're going over everything there is to know about combat in Mind Over Magic, as well as some tips and tricks to get you through difficult fights. If you want to learn about something specific, timestamps are below. So let's get into it. First off, let's talk about gearing up for battle. When you first click a battle, you're brought to a screen where you can choose your mages and your supplies. You can bring up to 4 mages into battle, 2 in the front row and 2 in the back row. Enemies will only attack front row mages unless they have special attacks which can hit the back row. The front row is the blue diamond icon and the back row is the yellow triangle icon. Drag mages from the left onto their positions to include them in the battle. On the right side of the screen, you can add supplies. These potions and elixirs can be incredibly helpful in overcoming difficult battles. We'll go over these supplies in depth later in the video. Let's go over the different types of mages that you can bring into battle. Here's what each mage specializes in. First off, let's talk about earth mages. They're the tanks of our group. They have the incredible earth armor ability, which adds armor and taunt. A quick note about armor: when a mage has armor and takes a hit, the armor is damaged before the mage's HP. Taunt makes it so that enemies attack the mage who is taunting with their next attack. Earth mages have 2 damaging abilities: Smash, which is a single target spell, and Quake, which targets a row. Smash and Quake do more damage if the Earth Mage has full HP. Place your Earth Mages in the front row so that they can taunt enemies and absorb attacks with their Earth Armor. Beware of enemies who deal damage to multiple targets, because they'll still be attacked even if your Earth Mage is taunting. Enemies who outspeed the Earth Mage may get a hit in before the Earth Armor goes up, which is why I recommend hiring an Earth Mage with a good speed stat so they can set up their Earth Armor before taking any damage. Wolf can innately have higher speed, so they're pretty good for that. The other option for Earth Mages is going to be Vivify, just because they have high HP, and since your Earth Mages are your tanks, that's always a good thing. Next up, let's talk about Fire Mages. Fire Mages deal high damage to single targets. Fireball does a decent amount of damage and has a 50% chance to be a critical hit, which deals double damage. Flame Lash deals damage based on the mage's current mana and is modified by power. For example, this Fire Mage has 415 mana. Their Flame Lash uses 208 mana and deals 434 damage. Next turn, their mana is at 207 out of 415, and their Flame Lash costs 104 mana, and it now only deals 236 damage. You can see why mana is so important for Fire Mages. They use a lot of it, and they can deal incredible amounts of damage with it. Their final skill is Vengeance, which puts up a retaliation buff on allies. Retaliation does some damage when they're attacked. Fire Mages belong in the back row, where they can incinerate the enemy with Flame Lash. The best races for Fire Mages, in my opinion, are Human, because they increase their mana, Wolfkin, because of the increased speed and power, or Ravencolt, because of the sheer power that they bring. Wind Mages deal high damage to single targets, and they provide incredible support to their team. Multi-Strike is a low damage ability that hits multiple times. On the surface, it doesn't look that special. This ability becomes incredible when combined with a mage that has high power, since the mage's power is added to each hit. Multi-Strike 2 does 3 base damage per hit. This mage has 31 power, so each hit does 34 damage. This can be further increased with the Potion of Strength, which adds plus 50 power, and the Nature Mage's Surging Strength, which can add up to 30 power. Remember, each point of power increases the damage per hit, which allows Wind Mages damage to rival Fire Mages since they hit multiple times. Their other abilities are Shield of Wind, which adds the shield buff to allies, and Haste, which adds the hastened buff to allies. Shield blocks 1 hit, and Hastened allows the mage to have 2 turns in 1 round. Both of these abilities are amazing support options. Wind Mages belong on the back row, where they can damage enemies and support their allies without fear of being hit. The best race for a Wind Mage is going to be Ravencolt because of the increased power that they get, which translates to significant damage with their multi-hit. Next up, let's talk about Nature Mages. Nature Mages are great at supporting their allies in battle, but they have low damage comparatively. Growth damages an enemy and leaves behind Thorns, which deals 10 damage per round to the enemy in that spot. Vine Lash can damage 2 enemies, one in the front row and the enemy directly behind them. It also switches their position in battle. Vine Lash can be a very useful tool to allow your other mages to hit a troublesome backline enemy, like this Hallowed one whose AoE attack hits the entire group. Nature Mage's last ability is Surging Strength, which provides a plus 30 power buff to allies. I usually place my Nature Mage in the front row so that they can buff the damage dealers in the back row with Surging Strength. The race for the Nature Mage isn't really important for battle, since they're mostly just doing support. Currently, the other mages, which are Lightning, Water, and Dark, are fine in battle, but they are definitely outclassed by the mages I previously listed. I'll quickly go over their abilities, but won't go in depth on any strategy. Lightning mages do decent damage and have a unique distinction of being able to attack any enemy on the battlefield, even the back row. Their damage is just less than fire and air, though. Slowing Strike does decent damage and applies Jolted, which makes the enemy take their turn last. Bolt does damage. That's it. Recharge provides an ally with mana and speed. Water mages have the Torrent attack, which does more damage when they're in the back row. They can also attack with Soak, which lowers the enemy's power and speed. Their final ability is Consecrating Drops, which adds armor to allies and removes Sadness, Fearful, and Restless debuffs. Dark mages have a unique playstyle, unlike any of the mages we've discussed previously. Shadow Cloak is a buff that provides a chance to dodge. Tentacle Lash does increased damage if the mage has the Shadow Cloak buff. Miasma attacks all enemies. Even with the Shadow Cloak buff, Tentacle Lash does less damage than a well-built air or fire mage. If you select a mage and click on the Magic and Combat tab, you can see the different combat stats that they have. The heart icon represents HP, or how much damage the mage can take before they're downed. The blue swirl represents mana, or how much energy the mage has to cast spells. The wand icon is power, which increases the amount of damage the mage does. Next is speed, which affects the mage's turn order. The skull icon is for death saves, which aren't actually used in combat. These represent the amount of lives your mage has for when they get knocked out or receive a trauma. Now let's go over the different supplies that you can bring with you to battle. There are a few different categories that supplies fall into: healing, recharging, damage, and buffs. Potion of Rejuvenation and Greater Rejuvenation heal, and the Revival Flask will bring up a mage who has fallen in battle. Recharging and Greater Recharging potions will restore mana. There are a few damage-dealing supplies to choose from. The Dragonfire Flask deals damage, Lightning in a Bottle deals damage and applies Jolted, reducing enemy speed, and the Miasma Flask attacks all enemies. Buffing potions are my favorite, and they allow your mages to go from good to outstanding. The Hastening Potion adds the Hastened buff and allows the mage to have an extra turn. Potion of Strength adds power. Earth Guardian's Potion adds an incredible amount of armor and taunt. And finally, Potion of Retaliation adds Retaliate. The best part about these supplies is that mages can use one each turn in addition to taking their normal action. So for example, a mage can drink a Hastening Potion to give them an extra turn, attack, and then immediately take a second turn, use another potion, and make another attack. You can bring up to 10 supplies with you into each combat. For difficult battles, I suggest bringing Earth Guardian's potions, Hastening potions, Potion of Strength, Dragonfire Flasks, and some healing and recharging potions. You never know what type of enemies you'll encounter, so it's always good to over-prepare. Any potions you don't use are dropped on the ground when the battle's finished, so they aren't wasted. If your mages have enough speed to act before the enemy, you should be able to handle even the most difficult 4-skull fights when you bring these supplies. The last thing to talk about on this combat page is the Fill Mana Before Battle checkbox. You pretty much always want to check this box so that your mages enter battle with full mana. Now that we know which mages to bring into combat and what supplies we should take, let's take a look at the combat screen and talk about how combat actually works. In the top left, you can see your mage's health, mana, death saves, and abilities. At the top of the screen is the turn order. Combat is turn-based, and the unit with the highest speed goes first. At the bottom of the screen is the combat menu. The left side are your different sub-menus. Selecting Cast allows you to use your mage's abilities. Using an ability ends their turn. Select Use to use potions and flasks. Be sure to do this before your mage casts their ability. Using a potion is considered a bonus action, and each turn your mage can take one optional bonus action before they cast their spell or flee. Move allows your mages to swap places as a bonus action. Flee is an action that allows your mage to flee from battle the next turn. If you're following this guide, you shouldn't need to use this ever. The last option is Pass, which passes the mage's turn and restores some mana. Use this option only as a last resort to restore a little bit of mana. Finally, let's look at the combat arena. Your mages are on the left and the enemy team is on the right. You can hover over an enemy and then hover over their ability to find out what it does. Almost nothing in combat comes as a surprise. You can read each enemy's ability, see where they are in the turn order, and decide what to do based on that info. Can you defeat a strong enemy before it's their turn? Is there a weaker enemy, but it can be defeated in one attack? Is there an enemy that buffs its team, which you can defeat before it's allowed to buff? Ask yourself questions like this to figure out what order to defeat enemies in. I try to take out enemies that hit multiple party members first, especially if they hit the whole team. Dragonfire flasks are especially helpful for enemies like that, since they can hit the back row too. There's one thing I haven't talked about yet, and that's events that affect battles. These range from elements waxing and waning, with waxing mages hastened and waning mages going last in the turn order, to races being better or worse in a fight. Before you start the battle, be sure to check out modifiers that might be affecting battle conditions. A bad modifier can result in death even if you've done everything else perfectly. Let's put everything we've learned together to defeat this 4-skull battle. Start with Earth and Nature mages in the front row, Fire and Air in the back row. For potions, we're bringing 2 Hastening, 2 Earth Guardian, 2 Dragonfire, 2 Strength, 1 Healing, and 1 Recharging. Let's look at the enemies. 4 Scythes. Each has an attack that deals 60 damage and gives plus 25 power to its allies. This means we'll be taking 60 damage from the first attack and 85 damage from all 3 attacks after that. Adding that up, that's 315 damage. Yikes. Thankfully, the Earth Mage is the fastest, so they're going to go first. I'm going to start with a Hastening Potion, which will provide the hasted buff and give the mage an extra turn. Let's also cast Earth Armor, which gives us 120 armor and taunts the enemies. Now it's the Earth Mage's turn again. Thanks, Hastening Potion. I'll use the Earth Guardian's Potion this time, which gives 250 armor. We're at 370 armor now, which is enough to last us the first turn. Let's do some damage to the entire front row with Quake. Next up is the Nature Mage. We brought them along to buff our allies, so let's just use Surging Strength on the back row of our team. This will give them extra power for their attacks. All 4 of the enemies have their turns now. Thankfully, we know exactly what they're going to do, because our Earth Mage is taunting the enemies and has enough armor to withstand all that damage. After those hits, they don't have much armor left, but that's a problem for next round. It's our Air Mage's turn next. We have a few options here. They can do damage, they can add haste, or they can shield. I'm choosing to use haste on the back row so that our damage dealers get an extra turn, and we don't have to waste any more haste potions. Since the Air Mage just hasted themselves, they are going to get another turn immediately. I'm using a Potion of Strength to increase the Air Mage's power by 50. That's enough power to take down one of these scythes in the front row with a multi-strike. Our Fire Mage is up next. There's an event going on right now that is causing fire to wane, which means that they are last in the turn order. Hasten still works, so they have 2 turns back to back now. Let's use Flame Lash to defeat the last scythe in the front row. 2 down, 2 to go. On their second turn, I'm using a Potion of Greater Recharging to restore some mana, which will also increase the power of Flame Lash enough to defeat a scythe in 1 hit. There's just 1 enemy left, and the first round is already over. Most of our team is hastened, so when we look at the turn order, we can see that everyone gets a turn before the enemy's scythe. I'm not bothering with armor or buffs, let's just attack this scythe until it's down for the count. There we go. With a little preparation, we beat a 4-skull fight on turn 2 without taking any damage. I use mages with tier 3 wands in this example, but these strategies work regardless of the wand tier you're in. Just don't go trying to fight a 4-skull enemy with tier 1 wands, unless you need to fill some graves. Anyways, that's everything I know about combat. If you have any questions, leave a comment and I'll try to help. If you found this helpful, I would really appreciate if you liked the video, and if you love Mind Over Magic and want to see more content, subscribe to my channel for more tips and guides. Thanks for watching and hope you have a great day. Bye!